How does that impact you emotionally?
But as the practice evolved within probably the first 8 to 10 years, I realized that long term, if you look at the practice as a business, one does need to diversify.
Or best practices to make ourselves look better, around the eyes and face? Is there any?
Well, Will, it's a great question because I hear it all the time.
Yeah, right.
The direct answer is no. There truly, for me, I just try to, number one, be sincere and honest. I think you do need to be direct and honest with the patient. You can't really beat around the bush and sugarcoat it too much. I may relate in certain circumstances to my own family members who I've done surgery on. For example, my mother that I did cataract surgery on many years ago, my wife who I've done blepharoplasty eyelid surgery on.
Wow. Yeah. What advice would he give him?
Using that old currency that
Wow.
still had value, and we were able to flee through Mexico. So we actually went to Mexico and then were there for 6 months.
It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Emilio Justo, MD. He's an ophthalmologist, eye surgeon, and a TEDx speaker with millions of views. Dr. Emilio, so good to see you.
Thank you, Will. It's really a delight to be here with you, and thanks for the time. I greatly look forward to this opportunity.
As I always say, the doctor will see you now. So, Dr. Emilio, you have the power to restore sight and significantly improve a person's quality of life. How does that impact you emotionally?
Wow, it's such a great feeling. There's only, I think, a handful of specialties that really have the ability of affecting a patient positively so profoundly as in ophthalmology. Whether it be in something like cataract surgery, where all of a sudden patients can see the world and see colors brighter and be able to perhaps drive without glasses, whether it be something like blepharoplasty, which I do a lot of, blepharoplasty, or what people generically refer to as eyelid lifts. But for people who have heaviness and fatigue and tiredness of their eyes, it helps improve their peripheral vision, and it helps improve their self-esteem and confidence. So
I didn't know that. It helps you improve your peripheral vision.
yes, that's how a lot of our patients, we are able to get authorized through their insurance company to have upper eyelid blepharoplasty covered by insurance. Of course, lower eyelid blepharoplasty is never covered by insurance. It's always a cosmetic thing. But in select cases, definitely we're very good at getting authorized for the upper lids specifically for that reason, because it most definitely helps improve the peripheral vision.
That's amazing. And how I guess you're doing surgeries for cataracts and other vision aspect surgery. How did that lead to cosmetic surgery for people?
Yeah, so if we go back to my training, my residency days back in the late 1980s in Washington, D.C., I was fortunate because I went to a residency that was very clinically oriented. It wasn't what I call an academic or research-based residency. So we got to do a ton of surgery. We had attendings in many different specialties. And so I was exposed to a lot of what's called oculoplastic surgery. And so I had a lot of experience just straight out of the chute coming out of residency, so that when I first started my practice way back in 1989, I was doing what I call bread and butter oculoplastics, the most common things, which are basically your blepharoplasty for hooded eyelids, your muscle tightening for people who have muscle weakness of their eyelids, your ectropions and entropions, where the eyelid turns out or the eyelid turns in and rubs the eyelashes rub against the eye. So
Yes.
what I call the bread and butter oculoplastic procedures. And so I had a lot of experience in that. And so I started doing that straight out of the chute. But as the practice evolved within probably the first 8 to 10 years, I realized that long term, if you look at the practice as a business, one does need to diversify. because in today's healthcare, with medicine being so government controlled with Medicare and other such programs, that insurance reimbursement was just on the decline, even way back in the 80s and 90s. And
Mm.
that decline of insurance reimbursement has continued for the last 3 to 4 decades. So I started diversifying, and basically I built kind of what one might call a med spa within the practice. I started getting into more and more aesthetic and cosmetic procedures. I took postgraduate courses and learned to do facelift surgery, endoscopic brow lift surgery,
Wow.
full body liposuction. So I did that for many, many years, and it was just truly a method of helping our patients, which of course they loved and were gratified with the results, but also being able to diversify and not strictly depend upon insurance or government reimbursement, because, as I said, that was on the decline.
Yes. And I guess one question is, when you see someone who feels better about themselves and they walk in with more smiles, I guess what goes through your mind when you see somebody come in glowing a little bit brighter?
Oh, it's a great feeling because, in our practice, I've always been very proud of the fact that we have always tried to treat our patients as an extended part of our family. I mean, we sincerely do. And the staff all know that. It's something that I've preached from day one. So, a lot of these patients that come in, and we've been seeing them for years, and in some cases for decades, we've been seeing these patients. And it's wonderful. You see them, they have a big smile, you get a big hug, catch up on perhaps their family, or they ask about my kids. It's really just a wonderful thing. It's such a gratifying specialty. It really is. I mean, I don't know of any other specialty where I would be as content as I am in ophthalmology.
Dr. Emilio, I know, a lot of people always ask you everything, and I'm interested as well, and I'm sure the listeners are as well. What are some of the things we can do with maybe some over-the-counter creams or best practices to make ourselves look better, around the eyes and face? Is there anything you could share with our viewers here?
Well, I'm not so much an expert on over-the-counter things because in our practice, we actually use what we call medical grade skincare. For
Okay.
example, there's a product line called Obagi that's been around forever, and we've been a huge Obagi practice. So there are certain Obagi products that are used around the eyes very effectively to help build elasticity to the skin. That there are also products that help decrease sunspots and hyperpigmentation. Sunspots are what in the old days people would call liver spots, which is a silly term, has nothing to do with the liver, but hyperpigmentation, et cetera. And then, of course, you have what's well known nowadays is your injectables, right? Your injectables include things like Botox Cosmetic, and then there's its competitors, which is Dysport and Xeomin, which help relax muscle contraction. So for expression lines, for the crow's feet around the eyes, the smile lines, the 11s in between the brows,
Yes.
it works very, very well. And then you have your dermal tissue fillers, your Restylans and Juvederms and Radiesse and other products similar, which build up volume. They plump certain areas, so they may plump your cheek, your lips, your chin, etc. So, of course, those are not over the counter, but
Yes.
that's kind of the mainstay of non-surgical cosmetics in today's day and age.
Is there, I always read on the internet and it could be, the information is non-substantiated. Is there any type of an eye exercise, focusing that someone can do, to prevent, as age-related, you know, molecular degeneration, eye muscles kind of weakening? Is there anything folks can do for that?
Yeah. Well, Will, it's a great question because I hear it all the time from
Oh, yeah.
patients.
Right.
The direct answer is no. There
No.
really are no eye exercises that contribute to the improvement of any type of muscles around the eyes. So it's not something that, as ophthalmologists, we really talk about. There are, for example, patients who either have a strong family history of what's called macular degeneration, which is a degenerative condition of the retina, of the central retina
Mm.
called the macula, which affects our central vision. There are supplements that have been shown to possibly slow down the progression of macular degeneration over the years. The so-called AREDS, AREDS, which stands for Age-Related Eye Disease Study.
Mhm.
And so those are over the counter. They don't help cosmetically, but perhaps they will help slow down any progression of macular degeneration for those patients who have early signs and family history.
Dr. Emilio, medicine is very demanding and very stressful as well. So with yourself, right? How do you manage the stress and emotional toll when a patient's condition presents a complicated approach to a desired outcome? Not every case is simple and the same. So when someone comes in with a complex issue going on, how do you manage the stress and emotional toll of that?
Yeah, it is true. We do see,
Doctors are people too.
unfortunately, it's a minority of patients that I personally see, but we do encounter some patients that have conditions. Again, it could be advanced macular degeneration, advanced glaucoma, which is irreversible, and truly, for me, I just try to number one be sincere and honest. I think you do need to be direct and honest with the patient. You can't really beat around the bush and sugarcoat it too much. I do feel that I also try my best to give them any positives. Uh, for example, if they have advanced macular degeneration, I may tell them that, look, your condition is at effectively an endpoint. You're not going to lose any further vision. You'll always have your peripheral vision. You're not going to need a guide dog to walk with, but you're just not going to be able to drive a car or read fine print. So I think just being empathetic, uh, talking, very directly with them, looking them in the eye, having a soft tone. I think just treating them with dignity and respect as any human would want to be treated, I think are the keys. But there are conditions that you just can't change.
That's excellent. In Dr. Emilio's, all of us are thinking, right? How do you build rapport and trust with a patient that comes in that's nervous, for a procedure that needs to be done? How do you relate to that patient to, assuade their fears?
Yeah, and we do see those probably a little bit more often than the other situation as patients come in, they're a little anxious. Like let's say even something as basic as having cataract surgery. They know they need it. Their vision is significantly affected, but they're visibly nervous, and they may even tell me, "Hey, I'm really really nervous." And again, I just treat them empathetically, and I say, look, we're going to take care of you. There's going to be an anesthesiologist present. We're going to give you medication through the IV. You won't even know what's going on. I can assure you that you will do great. I may relate in certain circumstances to my own family members who I've done surgery on. For example, my mother that I did cataract surgery on many years ago, my wife who I've done blepharoplasty eyelid surgery on.
Wow. Yeah.
I'll use my own family example sometimes just to show them that this can be overcome and to know that we're all a team, we're all working together, and that they will be treated with white gloves.
Dr. Emilio, you've been in practice for a long time. You've done a lot of work, a lot of procedures. Picture yourself in med school as a young man. Remember those days. What would Dr. Emilio Justo now tell the young, aspiring man in med school? What advice would he give him?
Wow, what a thought-provoking question. I think as I look back, I would say number one, time is going to fly by exceptionally quickly. I personally am in my 36th year of practice, Will. Now,
Wow.
I know you don't believe that. You're thinking, oh, he doesn't look
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
How
It's
could
hard to
that be?
believe. Yes.
But 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 the time has gone by so quickly that I would say, look, enjoy every moment, enjoy the journey. It's all about the journey. It's not about the destination. I would also say, again, more from a business standpoint, is to try and learn business practices because in medical school that's the one thing, and I have medical students that rotate with me every week, and I ask them, and they all agree, in medical school none of us as medical students are taught anything, not one little thing about the practice of medicine as it relates to the business. And so we're just thrown out there and we have to learn it on the fly, which is how I learned it. And believe me, I've made tons of mistakes over my many years of practice. And so I think if I did it all over again, I would maybe have been more proactive in, I don't know, taking practice management courses or just business courses, accounting courses in college. I mean, I did none of that. When I had electives in college, I would take a foreign language, or
Hmm.
I would take, I even took, believe it or not, because I used to love math, and in high school, I took calculus as an elective. Go figure.
Ooh,
What
yeah, that's
good has that
not
done me?
here.
I don't even remember the first thing about that. So I think if I had to do it all over again, I would have taken more pragmatic courses that could help me from a business perspective in terms of practicing medicine.
Dr. Justo, that is amazing. Good advice to tell your younger self, which I recommend everyone. It's great exercise. Think of yourself now. What advice did you give your younger self and bring it back today? That's fantastic. So, listeners, viewers, I hope you're having a good time learning a few things. And listen, Dr. Justo has a very unique background. He arrived in the U.S. as a Cuban refugee. What challenges, Dr. Justo, did you and your parents experience when you first arrived on the shores of Florida? I assume, right? You arrived in Florida, and
Actually, not true, Will.
not true.
So
Okay.
basically, let me rewind, if I may, for just a moment.
Yes.
So in Cuba, let me really go back. So in Cuba, one of the first things when Castro took over is he mandated that the natives trade in their currency, their cash, to their local bank for a new currency that Castro had created. But of course, this new currency had little to no value because he wanted the old currency. My father, who always distrusted Castro, instead chose to bury his money in the backyard. Well,
Wow.
fast forward, sometime later, a year and a half later, and my father had befriended a Canadian diplomat. And with the help of this Canadian diplomat, he was able to purchase airline tickets on the black market using that old currency that
Wow.
still had value. And we were able to flee through Mexico. So we actually went to Mexico and then were there for 6 months. And then back in those days, and this is the mid 1960s, in the United States, there were many church organizations that were sponsoring Cuban refugees' entry into the United States. So the church organization that sponsored my parents and myself, since I was an only child and I still am an only child, that this was Central Christian Church in Gary, Indiana. So unlike so
Oh,
many
wow.
Cubans that come in
Yeah.
through Miami, that was not our journey. We actually settled in Gary, Indiana. It was right at the time when Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5 were getting started. So we were in Gary. My grandparents came over a few months later, and the church organization that sponsored them, Tarkio Presbyterian Church, had them settle in a little town in northwest Missouri called Tarkio, which at the time had a very small college, Tarkio College. And So they were in Tarkio and we were in Gary, and my parents and I had nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. We came over literally with the clothes on our back. So
Wow.
my father was working two full-time jobs. He was working as a steel worker at U.S. Steel in Gary. He was also working doing maintenance and janitorial for the church. And then my mother, who had her doctorate in education in from the University of Havana, of course, those credentials don't transfer when you're
Mm,
coming from a communist country.
mm.
So she had to relocate with the help of someone that she met in Indiana, kind of an older lady who was her mentor. Uh, she relocated 3 hours south to Bloomington, Indiana, where Indiana University is, and she had to restudy all over again in a new language because my parents knew really hardly a lick of English. So they made the difficult decision to send me away to grow up with my grandparents between kindergarten through the end of fourth grade. So my grandparents and I actually lived in a dorm room in Tarkio College. It was the most incredible experience. I mean, what an incredible upbringing because I was surrounded by college students all the time. It was just a joyous experience. And it wasn't until the beginning of fifth grade that my grandparents and I moved back to Indiana to join my parents because by that time my parents had saved enough to be able to put a down payment on a home. We then moved a little bit south of Gary, about half an hour south to a small town called Crown Point, and the rest is history. So I grew up in Crown Point from fifth grade through the end of high school. So that was really kind of the journey, and it had its challenges, right? I mean, obviously English was not my first language, but when you're a young child, you quickly learn to adapt to a new language. My grandparents growing up, I mean, they hardly spoke any English at all, and even my poor grandmother, she just
Mm.
didn't even until the day she passed away, she hardly knew any English. My grandfather, similar to my mother, he was able to learn some English with a very heavy accent. He actually in Cuba was a CPA, so he actually became an accountant for the college. So he was working in their accounting department. So it was an incredible experience. I mean, yes, was there some, I don't know, you might call it, I hate to use the word discrimination. I think it's thrown around too loosely nowadays, but certainly, some of the
Doesn't make
kids,
life any easier, that's for
yeah,
sure.
I mean, some of the kids would make fun of our family and make fun of my grandparents, because of their accents. And
Kids are good at that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, kids are kids. So gosh, I remember even in Tarkio, my grandmother experienced a stroke during that time and left her with some uh, left-sided weakness. And I remember in school, I would go to school and there were a couple kids who were just so mean and they would make fun of her for, her symptoms or her weakness.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard to take as a kid when
It is.
your
I think that
grandparents.
leads perfectly to my next question. And leads, I think, to your TEDx career, which is fascinating. We'll talk about that. What advice would you give someone who comes from a very different environment, somewhere new, someone that looks different and speaks different, but they have to overcome and achieve? What advice would you give that person?
Well, I think on the one hand, you got to have a tough skin. On the other hand, you have to, enjoy life and keep a positive attitude and have that resilience. And I think that that's how I innately learned uh, what I call my resilience and my perseverance because throughout these challenges, I didn't let any of it hold me back. I mean, I just pushed forward, and I developed some really good friendships, and through those friendships, I became part of the community, and I was always very active, whether it was in my early years in Tarkio or my later years in Crown Point. I was always very active in sports, so that was helpful. But I think the main message is that no matter what challenges one is dealt, and my wife has taught me this in later years now in my adult years because I've continued intermittently to make stupid mistakes throughout my life. And my wife has consistently told me, look, when you're dealt a bunch of lemons, you have to be resilient and make lemonade. And so that's what I try and do. Whenever I'm dealt those lemons, I think back and I say, my parents went through far more difficult challenges than what I've ever experienced, right? I mean, I may think that my challenges have been so bad, but really, I mean, what greater challenge is there than to leave your home, your relatives, your belongings,
Right.
and leave your native country to a foreign country where you don't speak the language, and here you have a small child that you're taking with you, and you don't know what you're going to encounter, right? You're searching for freedom and opportunity, right? That's what my parents were looking for, and not so much even for them. My parents were always very, very selfless parents. They were always making decisions based upon what would be the best for me in the long run. So when they sent me to grow up with my grandparents, it wasn't out of any selfishness on their part. They strategically thought, okay, in the long term, this is going to be the best. We're going to get reestablished in a new country. We're going to save up. We're going to buy a home, get a car. The basic things that many of us take for granted. And ultimately, having those material things will offer our son tremendous opportunities to succeed. And indeed, they did. So their grand plan, so to speak, actually did pay dividends in the long run.
Dr. Emilio, this segues perfectly into what was the initial inspiration behind your TEDx talk, which received millions of views, called Delayed Gratification, Your Superpower to Success. What was the inspiration?
Yeah, so let me just take you a little back. So I've always kind of liked TEDx talks, et cetera. And so here I was one day, just sitting on my stationary bike, biking, and I'm kind of looking through YouTube, and I see an advertisement for an organization that kind of helps prep people and teaches them how to go about the TEDx process, how to apply, how to write a talk, how to practice, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, wow, this is interesting that I'm encountering this because it's something that's always been in the back of my mind. So I went ahead and joined. And as I'm thinking about what to talk about, at first I'm thinking, gosh, it would be lovely to talk about what I truly believe in my soul, in my core, are the attributes that have gotten me to where I am today in my life. And it's what I refer to jokingly as my Cuban triad. And that triad is number one, self-discipline, number two, resilience and perseverance, and number three, delayed gratification. So initially, for that first talk, I was working with kind of, you might call it a speaker coach through this organization. And she said to me, look, these are all great topics, but, you only have 10 or 12 minutes to present an idea. And that's just not enough time to cover these three topics. So just choose one and concentrate on the one. And so I thought about it and I thought, okay, they're all important, but what really resonated with me at the time is the delayed gratification because that's been really my life's journey up until maybe the last 10 years where I've kind of let myself enjoy some of that gratification. But I thought, okay, I'm going to talk about this because this is what I didn't consciously think about delayed gratification. It's just my upbringing and my life because I didn't have the ability to have that instant gratification that in today's society, of course, and I have three teenage kids, and it's very difficult. I mean, everything is based upon immediate gratification. I mean, everything, whether it's a food delivery, whether it's an Amazon package. I mean, everything is based on immediate gratification and the ability to, to set aside those immediate pleasures in favor of a later,
How
often
how does that
fleeting.
fit in today, Dr. Emilio, with with the internet? I want something ordered, it'll be there the same day or next day. Everything is that. So, do you think that was part of the success of your talk and the number of views and your message today?
Yeah, I think when I read the comments, because I go through and read and respond to the comments that people post on the YouTube. um, I feel it did resonate. Now, it may have resonated for slightly different reasons for different people, but I think one of the recurring themes that I would read about is that it's a topic that seems so basic, right? So basic, but it's really rarely talked about. I mean, I really hadn't heard it talked about until I started talking about it. Maybe it was out there, but I didn't come across it. And so I think and please understand, when I preach delayed gratification, I'm not implying that there aren't circumstances where immediate gratification is okay to do. You know, if we want an instant whatever, a package delivered or food delivery, whatever, hey, I participate in that. That's all fine. It doesn't mean you can't have certain immediate gratifications, but what it does mean is that for your lifetime, for your goals, whether it be professional goals, personal goals, one has to be disciplined, resilient, and strive in the long term and not just think about the short term. We have to strategize for the long term and be able to suppress some of those immediate gratifications to get to a much larger gratification down the road. And I think, regardless of how society has changed, I'm a firm believer that our core principles, our core values as humans, it still is the same. You know, maybe things change over time. The style of tie that we wear today may be different than 5 years ago, but it's probably somewhat similar to what it was 20 years ago, right? So things go through cycles, and ultimately the core doesn't change. So when I get in these little discussions with our kids, they're trying to say, well, it's different. It's different now. It's not like when you were growing up. Well, yeah, certain things are different. Maybe technology is different, but I don't believe that the core principles have changed. I really don't. So I think to lead a successful life, and successful, I don't mean specifically from a material wealth standpoint. I'm just talking about success in every aspect of your life. That to be successful in life, you still have to have those core principles. You have to be willing to be disciplined. You have to persevere and be able to be resilient from mistakes that are made. You have to be able to embrace failure and not look at it as a setback, but rather look at it as a temporary step back and an opportunity to bounce forward to the next opportunity, the next goal, the next challenge. So it's a difficult thing, Will, in my experience, to teach our youth. And how do I know that? Because I have my own struggles with our own kids trying to teach these principles.
Dr. Emilio, Cuban American son, facing cultural upheaval, family upheaval, moving to a strange land, learning a new language, dealing with family members that had to move all over the place, to successfully going through school, opening up a practice, helping people live their lives better, to TEDx speaker imparting his wisdom for people of today and people of tomorrow. Dr. Emilio, when it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah, great question, Will. Truly, I want to be remembered as a person who really did his best day in and day out, a person who uh, was honest, who always showed integrity, who always treated others with respect and dignity, um, and and a person who, as all of us, are flawed. At no time, I made mistakes with my own parenting. I'm getting a little emotional here. I mean, I know that there are things that I could have and should have done better as a father to our kids, but I did the best that I could at the moment with what I thought was the best. And that's all you can ask of a person is you ask them to do their best, right or wrong. And so I just want to be remembered as someone who always did his best, never tried to hurt the other person emotionally, physically, what have you. I mean, I'll always try to show the dignity and respect of other people. Um, and someone who is extremely loyal to friends, to family, as a spouse, as a parent, as a business person. I'm very, very loyal to the vendors that I work with. So in a nutshell, that's basically how I want to be remembered.
Dr. Emilio instills the core values that we're all born with without the noise of today. Dr. Emilio, thanks so much for appearing today.
Thank you so
I
very much.
and if someone wants to learn more, we've shown your website up on the screen. Is there any other way they can get a hold of you with Facebook, Instagram?
So certainly number one would be my website, which is dremiliojusto.com, and it's DREMILIOJUSTO.com. Through that website, there are links to all of my social media uh, uh, sites and platforms. I'm particularly, even though I'm on all of them, but I'm really particularly tied in with LinkedIn. So if someone wants to reach me through LinkedIn, it's Emilio Justo MD. LinkedIn.com /in/ Emilio Justo MD. And so I check LinkedIn multiple times a day, certainly connect with me. Through the website, there is a contact page, and on that contact page, you can type in your question, your name, email, and I will get back to you easily within 24 hours, if not sooner, because I'm very responsive to people who reach out to me. So those are probably the easiest ways.
Thank you again so much for giving us your time. And everyone else, thank you for listening. And please, if you feel, please do hit a like and leave as many comments as you can. Let's erase that. Hit like, please, and please leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what Dr. Justo said and how it reverberates with you. Thanks so much. I'm Will MacPherson.